Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast. Jessica Donovan here. And today, I think is a bit more of a personal, intimate conversation than we usually have on this podcast. I am going to introduce you to the amazing Julie Tenner. Now, I've been following Julie online for quite a while. She is a relationship and intimacy coach, and she is a mum of 4 as well. So she has some teenagers in the mix and some younger children as well. And I've been listening to her podcast, Nourishing the Mother, recently, and it's just provided me with so many insights and so much comfort, as well as practical tips, which I am all for. In terms of relationship, improving relationships with my kids and also with my husband. So I wanted to bring her magic, her wisdom onto the podcast so that you could gain insights from her as well. And the topic we're talking about today is staying connected to your partner and your kids through the tween and teen years. I share a bit about how I've been feeling personally about this stage. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a little while, I've shared little insights over the last couple of years about, how I'm finding the teenage years and mothering through the teenage years and how that's been impacting me. And I share more in this conversation. So Julie works with long-term couples who love each other but feel stuck in cycles of overfunctioning, mental load imbalance, and growing resentment, recognizing that exhaustion and busyness often shift relationships from intimate connections to mere life management. And I think that will ring true for lots of our listeners. Julie helps couples reignite desire, arousal, and passion by reconnecting as lovers. Her heart-centered approach fosters deep intimacy, restores balance, and transforms relationships into vibrant, passionate partnerships full of possibility. Doesn't that sound amazing? And as I said, we're sort of broadening what Julie is really known for in terms of that, relationship and intimacy coach into the relationship and staying connected with our teenagers as well. Now, at the end of the podcast, Julie will mention a freebie that she has for us, which is an advent calendar for couples. And I just wanted to mention that as this podcast is airing, we are a little bit into December, but I just want to say that this resource, I have downloaded it myself. This can really be used at any time of the year. So don't stress that we're, into December. I would, recommend that you have a look at that resource and use it as inspiration, not just for now in that lead up to Christmas, as we'd normally use an advent calendar, but also, it's going to give you so many ideas about reigniting that connection with your partner, all year long. So let's hear from Julie. Hello, Jules. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Oh, me too, Jess. I really feel incredibly grateful and humbled to be in your space, which I have listened to and loved. So I'm very excited to be talking all things teens and health and mental health and how the heck are we doing this phase of life?
Oh my gosh, it's going to be an amazing conversation. And I do feel like, it may get a bit personal, and, I may have invited you on for somewhat selfish reasons because I want to have this conversation with you. I've been listening to your Nourishing the Mother podcast recently, again, I was just sharing this with you off air, and your words have just been so reassuring and insightful. And I'm just feeling really seen and heard when I'm listening to you. So I thought I need to bring you on to have this conversation with our audience here at Natural Super Kids.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, that's totally. I'm so here for real and honest, connected conversations. So I'm excited.
Hey, so do you want to start? For those of you who might not know, those listeners who might not know of you and what you do, tell us a bit about you and the work that you do.
Sure. So my name's Julie Tenner. I identify as a relationship and intimacy therapist, though it's been a tangent to get here. So I'm the daughter of a tantric yogic father. So I had a very different upbringing. Was doing women's circles and my own sexual healing after child sexual abuse, and my mother, who was also physically and emotionally abusive. So I've been on a real trauma-informed healing journey. So originally I was telling you I was a naturopath. I didn't really stay as a classic naturopath for very long. My whole practice, just slowly over the years, has tailored into somatic therapy, trauma-informed healing, specifically around sexuality, relationship, intimacy, and all of the bits and pieces in between. So I guess what I would call myself now is a therapist, a counselor, and I specialize in relationship and intimacy.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And so today we want to talk about, I know we're in similar stages of parenting with teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally have been really kind of floored by all the feels over the last couple of years with my kids becoming teenagers. I don't think there's enough conversations being had about how this stage of life affects us as mothers and fathers too. There's so much talk about teenagers are tricky and, they go off the rails and, how do we manage social media and how do we manage drugs and how do we talk to them about sex and all of that sort of thing. But I guess what surprised me is like how it's impacted me as a mum emotionally, mentally. I found it a huge period of transition. I mean, I'm in that perimenopause phase as well, which obviously is another huge period of transition, but a big transition for me and my husband and our relationship and our marriage. And of course, when kids grow up, your relationship with them changes so much as well. So I'd love you to share a bit more about how you've personally navigated this stage of parenting and life.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to say I feel like it's some sort of cruel joke that we go through perimenopause and menopause when we have teenagers.
I know.
What is that?
What is going on?
What is that? So maybe for your listeners, I'll just let you know I'm a mum of 4. So yes, I've always had my own business, but I've also always been a stay-at-home mum for those 4 kids and just work around them. So my eldest is 18 and is a son. And then I have 3 girls who are 17, 11 and 7. So I have a big spread. So, but I'm definitely in the tween and teen land and have seen a lot over that time. So I was trying to think about your question and go, what is the best things that I could share about how I've navigated it? I think number one has to be our own mental health and well-being, because what I hear from mums mostly, but certainly dads, is that it almost sideswipes them how full on the teenage years are personally for them. And often it puts incredible strain on relationships because the problems that you're going through with teenagers are often life or death situations, or have huge impacts on the family home and environment, on mental health, which sometimes feels even trickier because it's so unseen and unknown and nuanced and individual and scary. And you can find there's a really imbalance in how we as individuals meet that in teenagers based on our own experiences, and then the clash of parenting styles, and then the imbalance in mental load, and then this fostering of resentment or cycles of disconnection, or feeling like you're silos as you move through the world and somehow never really intersect. and you can feel really run down and exhausted. And where little kids used to go to bed at, 7:30 or whatever, and you'd think, great, I've got the rest of the night, thank God. And sometimes you'd be gasping for it. With teens, you don't. They're up way later.
I know. I really miss that putting them to bed at 7:30 and having the evening to yourself, hey?
Right, exactly. And so I feel like it's this time where we are sold the lie that we will have more space and spaciousness and, I don't know, somehow live it up. And what I see in my world with my friends and my clients is that often it's the opposite of that because it's so intense and challenging. And what I love is that you're willing to have a conversation around going, hey, I actually think let's just have a conversation around it, because I agree. I can't remember the last time I parented this intensively with my 17 and 18-year-olds. In the last 18 months or so, I think has been the most intense parenting I have ever done. And I attachment parented.
We are conscious attachment parents, right?
Yeah. And so that was a real shock to me and brought up so many feelings of grief and isolation and exhaustion. So, firstly, I just want to say you're in the club if you're here and you're not alone. I do think that this is a really common and shared lived experience. But things that I have found have worked, and I guess have been my guiding silos, is I've always done school pickup. And I do that because that 5 minutes in the car, even if it's 5 minutes for some of you, it'll be longer. That 5 minutes in the car, the minute they walk in my car, I know exactly how their day has been. And I have an instant checkpoint on where they're at. Otherwise, what happens is they get home from school, they're in their room, they're on a screen, and you have no idea how they're at, how they are, where they're at. No idea. And the teenagers are amazing at the lockdown. So I will always maintain that 5 minutes of school pickup is worth everything, because it's amazing. And we do carpooling. I do carpooling with another family. So they do the morning and I do the afternoon. And it's amazing how the conversations in the car you hear, when you're kind of invisible driving, you hear all the stuff you need to hear. And you know exactly where they're at without it feeling like an intrusion or somehow awkward or stilted in some way. So school pickup. I always make sure I have after school snacks ready so the naturopath in you will resonate.
Yes.
Because teenagers it still shocks me. They just do not have the energy or the intention to make stuff.
Oh my gosh. I was sharing about this on my stories the other day. Like, it's this pull, because you're all about fostering independence, and they are well enough, old enough to make themselves a smoothie or make themselves a healthy snack, that we've been serving them for their life. But they don't. They grab handfuls of whatever is the easiest to grab out of the pantry. So I've just actually started doing this again. And again, it's this time where we can come together and, they're eating around the kitchen vent. So I'm all for that afternoon snack, like preparing that for them, even though they can do it themselves.
Yes. And even just chopped fruit.
Yeah.
Like if I chop it, so it's literally there, it literally has to be, I just have to put it in my mouth. The second there's another step involved, they're out.
Like biting a whole apple, they're out.
Yes. So I'm a big proponent of after school snacks, just because I also know that is really going to be impacting mental health as well in terms of blood sugar dips and, even a regulation and settling activity into a transition into the family home from wherever they've been. And for some of our kids, for many of our kids, they also then are rushing out to extracurriculars. Lots of them are sport and have a physical demand and load on the body, or work, and same thing. So for me, the after school snack is really important. There's things I always keep in my freezer, which is the Thermomix fruit ice creams, which I just pre-scoop into like waffle cones, and I just chuck some baking paper over the top. So they are always in the freezer, combined with some healthy brownies. My daughter's gluten-free, so I always make sure I have gluten-free options. So as long as they will eat those for breakfast, they will eat them for snacks. They're just always around. I do think also the Thermomix is a savior, because that would get used at least 4 times every day in my house. At some point, someone's making something. So I do think that's great. We also had a chat about Life 360. So that's an app, and I felt really complicated about that because it felt like tracking them. And I felt really uncomfortable about it. And then I brought it to the table. We were out, my eldest daughter, who's 17, and I were out with another mum and her friend. And I was saying, oh gosh, I feel so uncomfortable, but also it's scary because they're out. And what happens if something happens? And this other mum and daughter shared that they actually thought it was great, that they felt like it kept them really safe. So if they were going out on a date or, they needed to check where someone was, for even a work pickup, they didn't have to ring them and they always knew. And so then I went, okay, this is an interesting perspective. We had a chat about that at home and we all agreed it felt great as long as we had boundaries of consent around that. So no one's stalking, there's no notifications on the phone. We're only checking when we need to know we haven't heard back from someone or they like to check where we're at if we're picking them up from somewhere. So Life 360 with consent conversations around boundaries, I think has been really beautiful actually as well. On the apps, we have a family chat. That's also been phenomenal as a point of contact and connection. So we want to be using their world as much as possible for connection. And a family chat group is so connecting because the amount of banter and even just general life admin that just keeps everybody on a touch point of everybody else is phenomenal. When we use that chat several times every day together. And I kind of love it. It's fun and it's funny. And then that will often spark conversations then when we're in person. So I'm all about a family chat group.
Yeah, that's great. And because it's rare when you've got older kids that everyone's, not everyone's not home all the time together. So if you need to share something with someone, like a family chat is a great way to do that.
100%. Do activities and events that they enjoy, which is such the beauty of having teenagers is you actually get to do stuff you enjoy.
Yeah.
Concerts and, tree climbing and axe throwing and we're off to, my daughter's favorite comedian and, the activities that are so adult that are so freaking fun to do together.
Yes, that's such a good point. Rather than going to the, little kid theater or the little kid movies, you can share the world so much more easily, can't you, with teens, which is such a positive.
Yes. So I think always having an eye on it's my responsibility to put forward points of connection. It's not necessarily theirs. We want to hold our own space bubble, and I'm sure that you and I will talk about that today, but I always thought it's my job to lead, to go first in the vulnerability of connection. It's a bit like why often some of us will avoid initiation with our partners because there's a vulnerability in going first. It's often the same thing with our teenagers, and they just think everything you do is cringe. You're cringe, the way you talk is cringe, the way you dress is cringe, the way,
the way you breathe is annoying, the way you chew is annoying.
So you just get this real the teenager in you struggles when you're like, oh God, I feel crushed every day because
you've got to really have that thick skin. I was talking to a friend about that, and that's a really good point. Like you've got to lead for that connection, but you've also got to have that thick skin for the rejection that you
right. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Yes. So I always thought, hold no expectations, but never stop trying.
Yes. I was actually speaking to my husband about that because he made a comment the other day that he's like, I'm not even going to bother with our 14-year-old daughter who just says no. He'll go, let's go for a surf or let's do this or let's do that. Things that she used to love doing with him when she was little. And she just says no every time. I'm like, please don't give up on her. Keep trying.
Yes, exactly. Keep trying. And also pay attention to what they like to do right now.
That's
because it can really, our kids can really change and change quickly in the teenage years. Like they're on almost a constant skin shedding as they try and work out who the heck they are in this world. And so they'll often try out really different versions of them, which might include being into really different things. Every year it might be totally different.
Yeah, so we've got to change.
We've got to meet them in the thing.
Yes, hold on to that one thing they used to love doing with us when they were 7.
Yes, that was really connecting. And I would have a feeling that that'll come full circle and it'll come back. But in this phase where they're constantly shedding skins, we've almost got to be flexible enough to and pay attention enough to look at what they're into right now. What are they talking about with their friends? What are they searching and Googling? Who are they watching on TV? And how can we offer moments of that? So I just think that's cool. I also always want to be the parent who does pick up. So I always say to my kids, it does not matter what time or where, we will always pick you up. And if we don't, we have Uber set up on their phone on our account so that they never have to pay for it. But being the pickup parent at any, and it gets late, like by the time they're doing 16, 17, 18-year-old parties, you're doing 1 a.m. pickups often, sometimes later. So, but I love that because I can remember as a teenager being in incredibly unsafe moments because there was no one. And being the parent who picks up means you carpool. So you're never just picking up one kid, you're picking up several. And then again, you get to hear everything in the car and see where they're at. And you get to know their friends, which in high school, you don't know their community and you have no real access to the school in the way that you do in primary school. So having as many touch points on that as you can, I think is great. And largely, we freaking love our kids' friends. Like, we just think they're amazing and incredible people. They like hanging out here. We like seeing them. We like picking them up. So having this kind of community parenting thing, like be the hangout house, be the house with the food and the snacks and the freedom to be here without pressure. I always thought, how can I create as many community spaces as I can within my home? Spaces where people want to hang out, where the kids and you incidentally hang out, and where friends can come over and hang out. So I think having a hangout house is an amazing thing.
Definitely.
As long as you have snacks.
Yes. The snacks are important. You've got to stock up on the snacks, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And, okay, here's 2 more points I wrote down, is don't fix. We so want to give them the wisdom because it's so hard won and they do not want it.
No, they don't.
No, they don't. And the worst thing you can do is try and make every moment teachable and try and somehow just dispense your wisdom, because they feel unseen and invisible. And just like we did when we were teenagers, we eye roll and go, you don't get it. So just listen. Listen to how shit it is and how unfair it is, and just acknowledge it. Yeah, that's really shit. Like, that's really unfair. Even though I'm sure there's a piece of your head going, oh, can we get over your privilege? And why are you so self-centered? And I really know how to fix this.
Or this really isn't a big deal in the scheme of things. Like, that's all going through your head, isn't it? But that is just not what they need to hear at that time.
It's just not going to build you connection.
No.
And at some point, if that's all they get from you, they stop coming to you.
Yeah.
And we want to have an eye on the bigger prize, and the bigger prize is that they keep coming to you.
Yeah.
So to get that, stay silent and affirm how hard it is until they ask you, how do I do this thing? Then great, go right ahead if they've invited you in. But if they haven't, you do not have consent to charge forwards with your wisdom.
With your advice and your fixing and your wisdom. I love that. That's so important. I know the best conversations that I have with my kids at the moment are those ones where I'm just listening and nodding and acknowledging how they're feeling about things.
Totally. And the one I had here was what I mentioned before, actually, was hold your space bubble. It's key. You have to hold your own energetic, emotional space bubble. You have to be okay without needing them to behave in a particular way for you to be okay.
That's a huge one.
Isn't it? Because the minute we personalize their behavior, we make it about us, we've lost the game. But letting them stomp and rave and do everything that they're doing, and still, when they walk through the door, hey babes, how you going? How's your day? Hey, I've got a snack for you, dropping it in their room, walking away, like just holding this space bubble of nurturance love is still here for you. Because you remember what it was like as a teenager. You feel so unlovable and so insecure and so unsure of yourself and the world and your place in it.
And then you come home and like blurt it all out to the people that you love and probably don't treat them the best. So for us to then be like, you are still loved. Here's a snack. I just love that.
Yeah, I just think we've got to be careful that our teenager doesn't meet their teenager and instead hold your space bubble. My job here is to be the space bubble. And this space bubble is pretty freaking good and it feels good and it feels safe and it feels comfy and sometimes it's fun. Eventually, they can't resist the space bubble and they want to come and co-regulate with you and join it. But it's your job to hold your own space bubble.
And that involves like looking after ourselves, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like making sure our cup is full so that we can, create that space bubble for them, which is, I think we really need to ramp up that, I don't know, like for want of a better word, self-care, like looking after ourselves so that we're regulated, as you're saying, for them, because it's so easy to get pulled into their fluctuating moods. And especially, like I said before, like with the stage of life a lot of us are in, like perimenopause, menopause, where our moods are fluctuating as well, it can be quite chaotic.
Totally, 100%. So they were the things I wrote down to be like, okay, how did I get through? I think it's these.
So good. I love that. Like so many insights and also really great practical tips in there. And I know like connection and intimacy, I would say, underpin the work that you do. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I agree. Yeah, I'm all about it.
So, connection, I think we've talked a bit about connection already, like, and also you mentioned grief, which was something that I've been really surprised about. I was talking to my counselor actually about, I'm seeing a new counselor, and talking about how the grief that I'm feeling through this stage of parenting, which I was not ready for, like missing those little people and the fact that, when they're little, you are their world. And when they're teenagers, you are not their whole world anymore. As we were saying before, and it's normal for you, like everything that you do to irritate them. And so that can be just really, really tricky. But I wanted to ask you to share some ways that we can foster connection with our kids as they grow up into tweens and teens, while also honoring their independence.
Yeah, it's big, isn't it? One of the things I wrote down here, which is where I've always begun when my kids are about 12, is a rite of passage ceremony. So I have always done that for my kids. We did that. We did a men's rite of passage for my son, and we did a woman's rite of passage for my daughter, and my 11-year-old, I will do that with her next year. And I think what's beautiful about honouring the transition in a way that is meaningful is that we get to process the grief, that we get to process the transition along with them. And we get to be able to share together what we loved and cherished and adored about this childhood phase, and what we're so sad about leaving, and what we're going to miss. And what a transition is holding space for the honouring of all of that, and what I'm scared about, and what I'm not sure about, and what I'm sad about, and what I'm really looking forward to as we enter this new identity. So the shedding of one skin and the closing of this door, and the walking in this new skin and opening of this new door, because connection isn't missing, and the relationship and the bond that you had and how central you are in your life isn't missing. It's just changing form. And it's the changing form that we struggle and wrestle with to understand and to let go of and to move forwards with. So I always loved a rite of passage for that. And that's still a beautiful experience that both my son and my daughter will comment on. So I do think rites of passage are really beautiful for all of us to process.
And then can you just share, did you go to, like for a weekend or something like together to do that? Or did you do your own personal sort of rite of passage at home?
I couldn't find one I really liked, so I did my own. But I knew all about rites of passages, and I'm a facilitator of spaces. So I designed them. So, and male rites of passage look very different to female rites of passage. So we really honoured both of those, or I honoured both of those experiences in completely different ways. So, a lot of my work is underpinned by the tantric principles that I grew up with and has been my life's work. So the feminine loves connection and support and safety and emotionality. It thrives in that space. But the masculine actually thrives in challenging environments. It's why, male rites of passages involve, staring the lion in the eye kind of experience.
Yeah, like more outdoor adventure-y type kind of
Yeah,
thing.
it has to be a form of death that they have to face, right? So the female rites of passage form of death looks like the shedding of the skin and the rebirth. For the male, it looks like some sort of near-death experience, or what we can see historically and culturally across the world. So I kind of replicated both of those experiences in different ways. So the female rite of passage, I got together a group of mums and daughters, or moon mothers, moon daughters, and one of them had their grandmother there actually. And we made flower crowns and corsages, and we would exchange those with our daughters. And then I had this whole ceremony around honouring who they are and the transition of childhood and what we've loved and what we want to let go. And we had a menarche talk and a sharing of bleeding stories and the understanding of how beautiful and magnificent it can be to be a woman, and how we honour our cycle and how it can be a blessing rather than just like this curse that you have to live with, and how awful. And we talked about all of the different ways that we work with that, and what they might like to do, and how they want to design their life, and how they want to be as a woman in the world. So we had all sorts of rituals around that, and this present, there was kind of the whole experience, but it took, 3 or 4 hours. And for my son, that looks very different. So the male rite of passage looks like a separation from mother. It's really important. So I actually sent him and my husband away for 3 days, and they went deep sea fishing. So the whole premise around it was this male bonding experience out of the home and away from, the mother who wants to keep them safe and nurture and, do all of the things. And on a ship with a group of men, and they were out in the wild ocean, and, some type of hard work and effort and outdoor activity and tussling with the feminine, which is, you could not get a better representation than the ocean. And I remember my husband sending me these photos, and I nearly died. I thought, thank God, I'm not doing this rite of passage, because this is why it can't be the mother, because it's on this ship in these enormous waves with this tiny little railing bar pulling on this bloody deep sea fishing rod. And I'm like, he's going in. Why is no one stopping him?
Why is he not tied in?
And then I watched this camera and thought, wow, look at what is happening here. This is why men rites of passage are so different to women's, because I watched this video from the perspective of all of the men that were there, and all of the men on the ship are basically in a semicircle around him, but with a meter or two's distance, and they're just leaning back watching. And I thought, that's extraordinary, right? This whole, you've got it. I trust you to have this. I trust you to challenge yourself and your strength and your capacity and rise. And of course, I just fell in love with that whole experience. So they did that. And then the whole completion part of a male rite of passage is that they then return to the village or the home with a greater sense of providership. So I organised that with my son. So they went deep sea tuna fishing. So they came back with this huge tuna haul. And my son then spent a day preparing with me, I helped him do that, a tuna feast. And then we invited all of our family over for this meal that he had provided for all of them. And we, just talked about him and what he'd meant to us. And, it was just so great.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yes. So I think rites of passage are so important for honouring who they're becoming and trusting them to rise in different ways.
Yes.
So
and I love just what you said about that kind of does need to be separate than the mum, because I think a lot of mums are like, yeah, I'll take my son on a rite of passage. We want to be involved, don't we? But this is a time, this whole period is a time of letting go. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. The other thing I wrote in here was speaking in their values, the doing things they like, which we already spoke about. And one thing I noticed actually is buying cute little random gifts, just tiny things you see that you think of them and just kind of I would pop them on their bed. And I remember having this conversation with my son once, who shared with me in a moment of vulnerability that he felt really sad because he'd noticed that I bought lots of little tiny random gifts for my daughter because I found it so easy to go, oh, she'd love that. Oh, she'd love that, because it feels so easy. Whereas for my teenage son, I've no idea what random little things to get him.
Yeah, I resonate with that so much. Everything my son wants is big, like he wants a new mountain bike or a new car.
Right. Yeah, right. Whereas I could be down and be like, oh, that's a cute little hanky. I'll get that for my daughter. Oh, she'd love that little body polish. I'll get that for her. But he really expressed that obviously I can see that gifts is a form of love language for him. And he really felt sad that he was missing out on that. And that was a real wake-up call for me to be like, okay, actually, Julie, you could do better. And maybe you could try and think a little bit more about what boys like rather than just going, too hard basket, I'm not going to think about it. And so I definitely have done that. And he really does feel cherished by tiny little, here, I'm thinking about you.
It's just a thought, isn't it? It is. It's like a token of, I am thinking about you. I love you.
Yes. So that actually has been really beautiful and still something that I do, just random out of the blue, leave it on their bed, and they love it. They love it. Play games, hang out in spaces with them, have parties with their friends and, the community that you have that have kids their age, be the house that hangs out and does stuff together. We definitely still do that. Encourage their growth, actually, in things that's been really important to watch what they're into and where they want to head and extend them in that. So whether that's extracurriculars or, items to expand whatever the thing is that they're into, 3D printing or art of some sort or whatever it is, or, helping them set up a business, which is definitely stuff that I do with my kids. So I do think that's incredibly connecting, and there's nothing more beautiful than watching them thrive in the world. I don't think that feels really connecting.
And really what I'm hearing is like, again, meeting them where they're at and, spending time doing the things that they want to do and that they're interested in and that they're curious about, which I'm very much into as well, rather than like, oh, I thought, you wanted to do this, or I think you're really good at this, like it being their idea and their curiosity and their interests rather than what you think is best for them.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
so I mean, that's what I had written down here. I think in the end, if you like the humans that you're living with, that's 80% of the battle. I really like my kids. Yes, they can be. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast? I didn't ask.
We can swear.
Okay. Yes, they can be assholes.
Yes.
Yes, they can be self-centered and awful. But, under all of that is I actually really like these dynamic, interesting people. And even if they weren't my kids, I'd choose to enjoy them and hang out with them. Like, they're fun and they're alive. And I think if you just meet them in, you're a person I like and want to hang out with, that makes all the difference.
Yeah, but just bringing that energy, doesn't it? And understanding the teenage brain is selfish. Is self-centered, I think really helps as well. So you can see past that because, sometimes it can be like, it's so irritating. Yesterday I spent an hour round trip to go pick up my son he's doing a school-based apprenticeship. So he's managing school, finishing off school, plus an apprenticeship, plus trade school. And he's like weeks away from getting his Ps, but at the moment he requires a lot of driving. And my husband does most of that. But, we get home and he just gets out the car. No, like, thanks, Mom. Or, there's just no gratitude a lot of the time. So I think, that's just an example of things reminding them to, be like, show appreciation, but also knowing that it's not a teenager's natural state.
No, it's not a natural state, but I also think that we can role model that in our own relating. So I would say my kids actually are pretty great at that. They will say thank you for every dinner. And they will say thank you for picking me up from school or work or the party or whatever. But we have a strong appreciation culture in our family. And my husband and I just think, say thank you for everything and you stave off resentment. Just say thank you for everything. Thank you for being such a magnificent human. Thank you for doing the dishes. Thank you for, instead of like, well, you should be doing the dishwasher. You should be blah, blah, blah. Thank you for doing that. My kids all cook a meal each a week and have since they were in grade 6. So they have these ways of understanding what that's like. So say thank you to them. They want to say thank you to you. My husband and I say thank you to each other for appreciation moments constantly. That is a culture. So I also think you can foster cultures that revolve around appreciating particularly invisible labor.
Yes. And I loved, you recently did a podcast on this, on Nourishing the Mother, and it was such a good episode about showing appreciation.
Yeah.
It was more about to your
relationship
partner.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just like, gosh, we need to do better at this. And so I did want to talk to you about this, about appreciation. And I guess we're there now anyway, but how it can transform our relationship with both our partners and our teenagers.
Yeah, totally. Well, we all know, say thank you mostly for the invisible stuff, for the invisible labor, because it is the daily grind and imbalance in equity within a family home or within just family Inc. and the management of household and kids and what is involved in the running of all of that. The invisible labor, the unpaid invisible labor, is the things that will build the greatest amount of resentment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then repulsion, and we're on opposite teams. And then comes the neglect or the icing out or the withdrawal. And neglect and resentment, I see as the two silent killers of relationship. That's what I see in my world. And I have watched relationships transform by simply having an appreciation practice at the end of the day for 3 things that were invisible labors that day. And can I say, this isn't just a women's thing. Like yes, most definitely, the mental load within a family is generally more stacked on women, definitely. And also, though, what I hear from a lot of men is that they feel like the appreciation is the key for their providership. So the invisible providership, the ways in which they are showing up and trying. So if we even think about it in masculine and feminine dynamics, just saying thank you for the things that no one else would notice in a day or that are easy to take for granted, make you feel seen and valued. And when we feel seen and valued, we feel connected and we want to be closer to that person. It's incredibly bonding.
Oh, and it's just so simple as well. Like, we've got a bit of a different setup in our marriage. Like, my husband does most of the domestic kind of work around the house. And yeah, listening to that episode, I was like, I have not been saying thank you for that. Like, I have not been showing my appreciation enough for that. And just bringing that back in.
Right.
It's just such a simple thing. And I can still do better at it. Like, it's a practice, right?
I mean,
like, sometimes it feels silly. Like, I don't know, like, a part of me can be like, well, I've been in the office, working all day and I'm not getting appreciated. So why should I say thank you to him for picking our son up or sweeping the floor or whatever he might have done. But if you can just, start that appreciation cycle, and then I've noticed he's appreciating more about what I'm doing.
Because this is the thing. What you appreciate appreciates.
Yes. Yes.
And, what you want more of, give more of first.
Yes.
We can't sit there like Scrooge going, you need to give it to me first. You're just not an energetic match for that, babe.
Yeah. So true.
We've just got to lead with love, because that's more the truth of who you are than its absence.
Yes. Definitely. And for us, that does build, that is a piece of resentment in our relationship. And it's just such a simple change, like you said, and you feel like you're more of who you want to be when you're showing appreciation. And then, like you said, you get that appreciation
Yeah,
back.
it's a cycle.
It's
Yeah.
never a bad thing to do.
No, yeah, I'm all about it. I just think the more that we can feel seen, loved, and acknowledged, the closer our relationships get. And it's the same thing for our teens.
It
I'll
was
just tell them, I'll just tell them random appreciations of things that
yeah.
I just really appreciate about who they are or how they showed up in a moment, or that they, I saw them do that thing, or, like just say thank you for everything,
Yeah.
and you'll be better off than saying thank you for nothing.
In relationships in general. And yeah, I wanted to say that as well, like bring that back to teenagers, because I've found that, especially when they're being, I don't know, they're in their little teenage
Yeah,
selfish mode. Like if we can show
yeah,
appreciation in that moment, I feel like it can really turn things around.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So can you share that
Mm.
appreciation practice that you said, like the end of the day
Mm.
appreciation practice? Can you share what that looks like?
Yeah, so that looks like being just an agreement between the two of you that you have an appreciation practice before you go to bed. So it might be that you agree at a certain time if you go to bed at different times, or that if you go to bed at the same time, you might put the lights out and you turn and face each other, and whether you're holding each other or not, that you say 3 things that you appreciate about each other from that day. And I would say to you, the more mundane, the better, in fact.
Mm.
Thank you for providing for us today. Thank you for working so hard for us today. Thank you for sweeping the floors and mopping them. Thank you for doing all of the washing. Thank you for making dinner. Thank you for hugging me when you got home. Thank you for taking care of Timmy when he had the meltdown. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
3 things.
So many things. We could go on and on and on and on in a day, couldn't we?
Just pick 3 things that you appreciate about each other and say it each night as a ritual, and it'll change your relationship.
Yeah.
I can always think about one couple that I had that said that saved their marriage.
Wow.
Just that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can relate to that. Like talking to friends and stuff, a lot of marriage problems are coming from that resentment of like feeling like, you're doing more as a partner than the other person is, or that you're holding a unfair load or whatever. But when you
100%.
actually start to see what your partner is doing and acknowledging that, I think that changes everything.
Yeah, totally does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just
Thank you.
understanding their love languages, love languages is
Definitely.
very helpful.
Yes. I know for me, like, just a walk past my husband and a little rub on the back, like that means the world to him.
Exactly.
And it's such a simple thing to do. And it's just that listening to that podcast episode you did, that was a huge shift for me. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
And so, like, I guess talking about partners and going back to this sort of stage of parenting that we're in, the tweens and the teens, as our kids are growing up, we often find ourselves with more time for each other, for our partners, but feeling maybe a little bit lost navigating this change because we've spent so many years like being very focused on the kids and all the things that need to get done. And so I guess like as well as that connection piece, is there other things that you can share that we can do to reconnect to our partners as our kids grow up if we feel like we might have lost a bit of that connection?
Yeah. Look, the way that I'll share 2 analogies that I use and enjoy. The first one of those is I think that we need connection snacks, daily, weekly connection snacks. So short little bites where it is just you walk past and you brush your partner's back, like you said. You bring them a coffee. You leave them a little note in their car. Hey, thinking about you, hottie. Whatever. Tiny, little fun banter moments, like tiny little snacks that bring you connection, little zings, rather than working as silos, running completely individual lives, and they're completely parallel, but they never intersect. that's what's creating the distance. So how can we have connection snacks that create these moments of coming back together again? So I love connection snacks. And though, you can't live on snacks alone. You've got to have meals. Meals look like a really intentional 1 to 3 hour block where you can spend together every week. We have to be able to have longer time, particularly if you are a responsive desire type as opposed to spontaneous. Boom, my body feels like this is a great idea. Responsive is like, it's not in my head at all until my body's feeling good. And it's a process to go from being in my head to being in my body feeling good to my head then going, this is a great idea.
Yes.
That
and
takes time.
And is it true that most women are that more... What was it? Not responsive. Yeah.
Spontaneous. Responsive and spontaneous, 2 types. No, it isn't. And actually that's a common misconception and cultural myth, I would say, and it still, I think, harks back to the gender bias that I think give harmful stereotypes around men are the predators or sexual predators and pursuers and have the higher sex drive and therefore are always chasing. And therefore it casts women in the role of, the no gatekeepers and being pursued. And that then rolls on to women perceiving if they're pursued, they're sexy and desirable and beautiful and enough. And if they're not being pursued, that they therefore are not sexy, desirable enough, insert. So these are really harmful stereotypes, not at all what I would consider what I see in the world. I would say it's 50-50. So they're in every relationships that I see, it's in the cultural reverse to that. We just have to realize how much we've been socialized and conditioned over generations. But it's not the truth of what sexually alive and diverse humans are in their bodies. So I would say in every relationship, regardless of gender, roughly half of you will have a spontaneous desire type. I can think about it. It's an instant chemistry in my head. It's a head-based sexuality. Boom, I'm on. And the other half of you will be responsive. And it does not seem like a good idea in my head at all. What I'm doing the dishes. There's all these things to do tonight. I've just dealt with spew and a nappy and the kids' tantrum. What are you even talking about? And so we can feel there's all of this then jarring around, I'm being taken advantage of. I'm being devalued. You don't see me. You don't see all of the jobs that are to be done. What I hear is that's not true. What's happening for that spontaneous desire partner was one, they probably don't understand that you're responsive and maybe you don't either. They don't understand that it's a process to transition from your head, from leading, from being mum, from being in doing mode to being in, I'm in my body. It's okay for me to surrender, to let go, to start paying attention to what is happening and alive in my body, how I'm feeling even, because I've spent all day not even in contact with how I'm feeling. That's all gone on pause while I've done all of the other stuff. And I need transition time to do that.
So that's where the meals come in. Is that what you're saying?
Where the meals come in. Yes. Yeah. So all of that is a whole other conversation. But this is where we have to recognize that snacks are not enough and we can't survive on snacks alone. Relationships cannot survive on snacks alone. And I would like to think that twice a week you could manage an hour, 2-3 hours together. But at the least once a week. And that has to be a priority, the same as your kids' extracurriculars are a priority and dinner is a priority and getting them wherever is a priority. You make that happen. It's a non-negotiable.
Yes, that's a really good example because, we're not going to miss our kids' footy practice, for example, but we'll say we don't have time. We don't have time for those longer times with our partners.
Exactly. We keep putting our partners and our relationship at the bottom of the list, like they're under dishes and they're under laundry. Ouch. Yeah, no one is going to want to stay in relationship with someone who they are less important than dishes and laundry for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
We all want to be cherished. We all want to be wanted. We all want to be needed and desired and thought that we're interesting and we all want that. We're human.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Oh, and so like that, it doesn't have to be a dinner out or because I also think people listening are going to be like, well, we can't get the kids looked after.
I know. I'm all about it. No, I'm all about it. That's why all of the experiences I do online are all about dating and couples dates at home. because
Yes,
I
love
want to
it.
remove as many barriers as you can. And also remember that day dates, I think, as a parent who's tired and exhausted and perimenopausal and all the things, I'm exhausted by 8:30 at night. Like, I'm ready for bed. So again, the socialized idea of somehow we both arrive at 8:30, 9:30, 10:30 at night, both spontaneously hot and aroused at exactly the right temperature and exactly the right moment and exactly, is just a fantasy.
Oh, yes.
So we have to get over the fact that we're conditioned to say scheduling is unsexy. It's the sexiest thing there is. To say, I'm prioritizing you, I'm picking you, I'm going to do the things for me, and we're going to have a couple conversation around what we both need to show up for that feeling, the mood, the vibe, the way that we used to pre-kids. And that is important, that we do that to maintain this simmer between us, which is the kettle analogy, which is the last one I'll share. I know that we've got to wrap up, but I love the idea of a boiling kettle. The idea being, let's say 0 degrees, cold water, 100 degrees, boiling, where you're having an orgasm. We're not doing penetration until about 90 degrees. So we're not having intercourse until about 90 degrees. So 0 to 30 degrees, I think, is your personal responsibility, because your sexuality, your arousal, your desire, your pleasure, your sensuality is yours first before it is anybody else's. It is not someone outside of you that pushes a button on you and you ignite. It's yours first. And it is part of, as you would know as a naturopath, libido, the sense of aliveness within our body and connection to ourselves and our body and our sensuality is part of our well-being. It's ours. So 0 to 30 degrees is your work personally for each of us, right? 30 to 70 is the couple's work, which is how do we keep this simmer going so that when we choose to turn it up, we're starting from 60 or 70 degrees. We're not trying to start the watched pot at 0 degrees that never boils.
Yes, I
so
love
we
that
just
analogy.
have to get real about what that is, hence snacks and meals, and stopping putting it at the bottom of the list.
So the snacks and the meals kind of build you up to that 70. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah. And you can absolutely do that together and have just conversations around what your desire types are and your initiation types and styles are, and all of the deliciousness that those conversations are life-changing for couples, busy parents.
And I love what you said about that first 30% is our responsibility. I think that'll be a surprise for a lot of people to hear.
Yeah, well, particularly mums, right? This is so much where I think feminine energy comes in, which is all about the connection to your body and your senses. That's all sensuality is. Sensuality doesn't mean sex. Sensuality, that's gotten again confused. Sensuality is literally your 5 senses. How do I absorb and receive information and pleasure and joy through my 5 senses? Sights that I love, sounds that I love, not just playing your kids' music, the music that you freaking love, that lights you up, that shifts your energy. Really enjoying that sunset, really enjoying, whatever it is, sights, flowers in your house, the things that light you up, right? What clothing do I love? What blanket textures do I love? Feelings, really feeling skin and moisturizers and, yours, your senses and your sensuality is yours. Connect to your body. It's like snacks and meals for you. How do I snack on my sensuality all day so that I have a touch point on my own pleasure and I have a touch point on my own body, that I'm practicing going head to body, head to body, head to body, rather than I've cut off my body and I'm just in my head.
Yes, which I remember hearing you talk about a while ago, like mothering is like
a masculine
you're
art.
in your masculine. Yes.
Yeah, because you're leading, you're guiding, you've switched off your needs and your feelings in order to hold space, listen to, and be with the needs of others. It's a masculine skill set.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So there's so many things to think about, and I wish we could speak for another whole hour, because we definitely could. I'm sure our listeners are like, more. But I love, and I wanted to touch on that feminine and masculine, which you've done so well there. And I just love that analogy of snacks and meals. I think it just makes it for us to be aware of
it's
those.
So naturopathic, isn't it? That's why
I
you love it.
I know, it fits in with the naturopathic philosophy so well. And we're often talking about kids and how they need snacks and meals.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really easy to keep in mind for our listeners. Like, just think about how you can implement those snacks and meals. And I was going to say before, with teenagers, like we said, you kind of lose your evenings because they're up late.
Totally.
My two like to stay up later than me, but you do get time back in the morning. So that can be a really good time for, like you're talking about, a day date. Kids are still asleep.
Totally.
Go for a big walk or whatever it is.
My husband and I love a lunchtime date too.
Yes. Yes, definitely. That's awesome. You've shared so many great insights and tips, and I'm sure this has been a really amazing conversation for lots of our listeners. So tell people who would love to hear more from you where they can find out more about you and what you offer.
Yes. Well, actually, I was thinking about this morning, and I wondered if a really beautiful freebie that I could offer your listeners is actually, I've created a couple's advent calendar.
Ooh.
So yes, it's an advent calendar for her and an advent calendar for him, and you can choose how you want to use that and spice that up, whether you want to have an open conversation about fitting it in or you want to keep it secret. But I've designed the whole thing around desire, arousal, and love language types, and it's different experiences each day that you gift each other as snacks. So, and there's a couple of meals in there, but mostly they're snacks. And you could do 7 days, 12 days. You could do the full 24 days each. My husband and I are doing it. And so that's why I created it, because I was like, December gets hectic and I don't want chocolates. I want spice and connection and to feel like we've got a pulse on each other by the time we get to Christmas Day. So normally that's $55, but I would love to create that for your listeners as a freebie, which they can get by heading over to Julie Tenner, TENNER.love, LOVE/superkids, one word.
Amazing. And I'll make sure that link is in the show notes so it's really easy for people to find. Thank you so much. That's so generous. And that sounds like something I'll be definitely downloading and having a look at, because it sounds so helpful. Like you said, December's so hectic, but it's also a good time to focus on that connection with our partners, right?
Well, and just finding ways and playing. Like, I would look at it like play. Why don't we just try some stuff? Okay, I don't know how to initiate. I don't know how to build simmer. I don't know how to build spice. I don't even know what I like. I've made it easy for you. There's 24 days that are different, and you just get to see. And then at the end of that 24 days on your Christmas holidays, you could have a discussion. What do we want to keep? What do we want to do again? And move forwards that way.
Yeah, it opens up that conversation. Thank you. That is amazing. And as I've talked about multiple times through this conversation, Nourishing the Mother podcast, I'll make sure the link is in the show notes as well.
You.
I just love your podcast. I love listening to you and Bridget, it is, isn't it?
Yeah, Bridget.
Yeah. The conversations that you guys have are so helpful for all stages of parenting, and also obviously you talk a lot about relationship and intimacy in that podcast as well. So I highly recommend you go and subscribe and have a listen to the Nourishing the Mother podcast too. Thank you so much, Jules. It's been so good to chat to you.
Thank you. You too. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.